Channel 2, English.
Good morning. Welcome to the EPP Group briefing. We have with us not only the Chairman Manfred, but only Esther de Lange, which is our Vice President responsible for economy and environment, and that she will speak to you about the vote tomorrow on the nature restoration law. Thank you very much. Manfred?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for your interest. And let me start with a celebration, because we are today celebrating 70 years of our EPP Group. So we are quite proud about what we contributed to the broader European development to establish the European Union of today. That's our positive momentum for our internal discussions. We have today, this week, two main important issues on the table. Let me start first with a quick, brief statement on the NATO summit in Vilnius. There is the key question already solved about Sweden joining the NATO community. The Swedish Prime Minister has our full support and can be now very proud about finally achieving the goal. We are, as EPP Group, we are ready for improving the relationship between the European Union and Turkey. There is no doubt about this. But we want to see, first of all, the concrete initiatives on the table. So when we speak about visa liberalisation and also a customs union, then the European Parliament is the legislative chamber for doing so. That's why we are ready for all talks, but we want to see the details. And then, obviously, Ukraine is in the center. I want to underline from an EPP Group's point of view that we believe that once the war in Ukraine is over, a membership is crucial for a future security architecture. So we have to heal in a way the mistakes of Bucharest. That is what the EPP Group is standing and arguing for. In the European Parliament, the big debate is obviously the Green Deal. We have already a lot of demonstrations out in the street here in Strasbourg to formulate the wishes from the civil society, from those who are affected on this law. Let me underline that the EPP Group shaped and supported the Green Deal in the past years. Out of 34 pieces of legislation in this Green Deal package, EPP have supported 32 of them. So only two we couldn't support. That was one about the combustion engine, and the second was about this nature restoration law. Climate neutrality in 2015 is a goal, but we are not a rubber stamping machine on bad legislation. That is what we have to express. That's why we look on the details, on the content of this. And we listen to everyone, those who are asking us to be committed on biodiversity and those who have concerns about rural developments and also the farmers. Our approach is bridge-building approach, is listening to each other. That's why we are asking for rejection and a new proposal from the Commission. And I want to be very concrete. What we ask for is a new proposal. We don't want to stop. We don't want to block an initiative. We want to have a solid base for the discussion. That's why the Commission should come up with a new proposal. That is our concrete request. And if I may say, if the Commission is telling us that whatever happens in this chamber, they will not present, like Frans Timmermans is telling us, they will not present a legislative new proposal, then I have to ask about the democratic thinking behind, because the legislator is the European Parliament. And if a majority of this House says this is not a solid base for achieving the goals, then I think it's a task, even the obligation of the European Commission, to present a new one, to listen to the concerns. I think this style of doing politics is also part of this debate. And again, what we want to do is bridge building, listen, and taking the concerns seriously. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Indeed, this is not about nature restoration. It's about the nature restoration law. If I look at Christian Democrats at local level, regional level, national level, they're doing nature restoration in practice in many various ways. But this law is flawed in the way it was designed, and we have said so from the beginning. Where are our main concerns? I think you know, at least those of you who have been in these kind of press conferences before, mainly about the clash that this legislation potentially has with other pieces of legislation, other objectives of the same Commission and the same EU, mainly in the field of the production of renewable energy, food production and the food price. May I remind you that for the past couple of months, food was the main driver of inflation, even more than energy. So the cost of living being very close to the concerns of our citizens. This is a big issue, and the impact assessment of the Commission is very limited on that. We would say not substantial enough. And I might add, from my member state, the provision of social housing, which is threatening to be stopped in terms of not being granted planning permission on the basis of Nature 2000 and this potential future legislation. And furthermore, there is no guarantee that we currently have, the way the law is currently phrased, that a judge in any of our 27 member states will not stand up like they already do in the Netherlands and say, you know, no planning permission on the basis of this legislation for example, housing and renewable energy production. So this juridification of environmental law, which is the agenda of some extremist NGOs, really wanting to stop down our economies, is something that needs to be prevented. And currently, the legislation doesn't give enough safeguards to make sure that this is for sure not possible. And then secondly, the link to other pieces of legislation that are there and that might actually be contradicted by this future or at least this draft nature restoration law. Because if I take a step back, and Manfred has already mentioned the huge amount of legislation already in place when it comes to protecting and restoring nature. There is a huge amount of legislation on the table, and there's often very little coherence. If there's no coherence, that leads to a huge administrative burden for many of our economic operators. But what is even worse, sometimes there are conflicting objectives within these pieces of legislation. So we would say, the EPP would say, that if I look towards the next European Commission, we first need some kind of a health check of all the legislation that is on the table and to see where the excess fat is that needs to be trimmed off so that we can actually have a lean but mean but functioning and consistent body of legislation in this field that we work with. So let me leave it at that. The Commission has argued that the nature restoration law is the basis of everything they will do in the future in the field of nature, just like the climate law, which the EPP supported, was the basis of all the legislative proposals that were part of Fit for 55. And we as an EPP say, if this is the basis needs to be sound and the basis needs to be broadly supported. And therefore it is better to have a new proposal that makes more sense, is more coherent, and that would get broader support rather than pressuring this through Council the way it was done leaving it up to what promises to be a very exciting vote tomorrow in plenary. Let me leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. We take questions now. At the back of the room.
Hi, my name is Matthijs Schiffers from Het Financiële Dagblad. I've got two questions. The vote promises to be very tight tomorrow. Can you say anything about members of your group that are not present here? I've heard that one of your members just became father, for example, and can't be here, so that might be one vote being lost. And I have a question for Esther de Lange as well. The Dutch government fell, there will be new elections, and your party is looking for a new leader. Are you interested?
For me, let me first of all congratulate Jeroen Leenaars on the birth of his daughter Tessa. And indeed, Tessa means there will be one vote less in favor of rejection. But I think as a family party, we fully support the fact that, someone who just became a dad for the second time is not in Strasbourg. If ever there was a good reason, this is a good reason. And I'm assuming other groups might have similar cases. People might be ill on the day of the vote, but this is really the level of tight that it might be. Which already tells you something in itself, and which is already a signal to the European Commission that this was maybe not a good proposal to start with. Then on the Dutch government, that fell over migration, by the way, and nothing to do with issues such as the nature restoration law. However, nature restoration and the issue of nitrogen, Nature 2000, remain huge issues in the Netherlands that could have become an issue determining the fate of this government as well. Because let me be very, very clear, nobody in the Netherlands, and this can happen in any of the 27 member states, maybe the densely populated ones first, Belgium, for example, but nobody in the Netherlands, when implementing Nature 2000 and when repeating the promise of the European Commission, don't worry, economic activity and nature protection can go hand in hand, nobody imagined that 30 years down the road, judges in the Netherlands would turn down planning application after planning application after planning application, even for projects that are needed to lower our CO2 emissions, that actually do something positive for the climate. As long as there's a tiny emission of nitrogen, even if you're building renewable energy, the planning permission is not granted. And this is the kind of thing the EPP is stepping up against. And that keeps me relatively busy, so I don't think I'll be queuing up first to be the new leader of the Christian Democrats in the Netherlands.
Next question. Eddie.
Thank you. Eddie Wax from Politico. Questions on nature, migration and the ethics body, please. First of all, how much would you say the EPP's stance on this is motivated by the rise of other farmers' parties, for example, in the Netherlands, with the BBB party doing well in recent elections? How much is that motivating your own stance on this? Is it not at all? Is it, to a certain extent? On migration, does the EPP support an investigation, an EU investigation into the Pylos tragedy recently on the coast of Greece? And what is the EPP's position on this new EU ethics body? Are you engaging in talks on this new resolution, or what's your stance? Thanks.
Okay, I'll take the farmers first. Well, the fact that I submitted the amendments that I submitted on the issue of the nature restoration law in January, and I think the elections that saw the win of the Farmers' Party were somewhere in spring, shows you that this was an issue in itself. And my track record, I think, in the European Parliament shows that. One of the first issues I tackled as a complete backbencher when I came into this House was the different ways of implementing Nature 2000 in member states. By the way, that vote we won against also the other stands being taken by Renew, the Greens and the Socialists.
We follow content, we follow our ideas, we follow what we believe what is right and what is wrong. That is driving us in this debate. But I also told already in my remark at the beginning that the style of doing politics should also involve people, should also pay respect, should also treat all arguments serious. And again, some behavior of others, I don't see this readiness to talk and to engage and to take this serious. We can only win to implement Paris and Montreal. So the two main pillars, climate and biodiversity goals on global level, we only can implement this if we win majority of citizens to follow this. That's why our approach of bridge building, of taking concerns seriously, is important. And I want to broaden the perspective a little bit, because this nature restoration law is part of a broader discussion, also supported by President Macron and by Prime Minister De Croo in Belgium, about a moratorium. I think, we as EPP, we think that we have to be extremely ambitious in implementing our goals. Again, I told you 32 pieces of legislation supported by EPP. We have to be committed. But for the next 5 years, we have to care a lot about our industrial base. We have to care a lot about competitiveness in the European Union. So we have to manage the big changes needed, the needed changes, in a way that we don't lose economic power. That is our main message for the future. On migration, we are absolutely ready for all kinds of assessments. You know, this is mainly job then of Commission and also of Frontex. The tragedy happened outside of Greek territory, so that's why it is an international responsibility. I would invite that we have a general understanding how to treat these tragedies, because we had a similar event in Lampedusa and Ceuta a few months ago, and the left in this House didn't initiate an investigation on this. So we need a serious management and not a party political management of these issues. And the third point about ethics body, the EPP welcomes the proposal of the Commission. For us, this is a good base. And we will also show, let me say, our political positioning in the resolution this week on the agenda. But generally speaking, we welcome this proposal.
Emmanuel.
Emmanuel Beretta, Le Point. If the rejection vote is not a success tomorrow, will you support the compromise by the Council?
I think that's a very academic question because, as you know, there's one amendment that covers the Council position on the table, but a lot of amendments that go beyond the Council position. And the EPP already has a problem on several levels with the Council position. For example, on the issue of financing, there's nothing arranged in the Council position. It says there needs to be financing. Well, you go and talk to the responsible budgets commissioner. I think he will tell you that the coffers are empty. So where is this money going to come from? The Council didn't answer that question. So it's basically telling European farmers, you need to take measures that mean that you have less income and more costs because you need to invest. And by the way, that money is not going to be given to you by the big supermarkets because they are looking for the tightest margin, so you are going to absorb those costs, even if you can't. And that's a very antisocial signal to be giving to the farmers that you actually want to be part of this transition. So basically the signal is it's going to be financed by the farmers themselves, which we think as EPP is absolutely unfair. And there are several issues several problems we still see in the Council text. It is therefore, I think, highly academic, this scenario, because if the amendment on the Council position is successful, there are there are how many amendments in total? 100 plus amendments that actually go beyond the Council position, and they would be very likely to be adopted. So I think that answers your question. Most likely in that case there will be something that goes beyond the Council, and we already have a problem with the Council position, so we would not support that.
Thank you. Jan Disseldorf, Süddeutsche Zeitung. You keep saying that this is a bad proposal and this is why you reject it. So it's a badly written law. So far, I haven't heard in detail from you how a good proposal would look like. If you say natural restoration, yes, what are the ideas of the IPP for a good law that you could also bring forward to inspire the Commission?
First of all, it's a law that is not written in a silo. This law has DG Environment written all over it. But in real life, there's not only the environment. There's also the economy, there's also energy, there's all these issues that you need to make sure actually can proceed hand in hand. So first of all, it would be a proposal that actually takes those other elements into the equation as well. Secondly, it would be a proposal that has an impact assessment that is not there just to be an impact assessment of 600 or 700 pages without actually answering the real questions. The real questions are, if you take 10% of land, agricultural land, out of production in the EU, what would that actually mean for the price of food and the availability of food in Europe? What would that do to our inflation figures in the years to come? Those questions are not answered. And we're in the EPP are not signing a blank check, signing something where the Commission says, trust us, it will be fine. We heard, trust us, it will be fine when it came to Nature 2000, and it is not fine in many of our regions and member states. Finally, also, a good law would actually do what the climate law did, namely take your international obligations. In case of climate, that was the Paris Agreement, and implement it in Europe. We say the same. We're not against nature restoration. We say the same about nature restoration. Take the Montreal Agreement and translate it into Europe. What the Commission has done is to sneakily do more than our international obligations, which we think is not a very smart way to start. And then finally, you need some kind of an emergency brake that allows member states, in case of this increased juridification, so lawsuit after lawsuit, telling your social housing providers, like in my member state, that they cannot build for the most vulnerable households because of this legislation, and other pieces of European legislation, that member states can actually press this emergency button and find a solution rather than just to carry on, which is what the Commission seems to be doing at the moment. So that's not even our full list, but I think it does show you, that there is an alternative story to be had. This is not no because we like to say no. This is no because we think we can do better.
Next question, Lorenzo.
Consul from Aska News. In the debate, there is still this issue, the objective of 10% of agricultural land that should be taken out of production. But if I'm not wrong, I could be wrong, in the Council compromise, this objective is not there, and the Commission doesn't seem to be particularly strong on this, on keeping this. So if that objective is taken away, if there is no compulsory objective, the Council text is actually much less full of compulsory objectives, binding objectives. So it is watered down quite a lot in comparison to the Commission. So why would you oppose this, since also many EPP governments have approved it?
Because, and I already partially answered that question, because there are still concerns about the Council text. The 10% might go down to a lower percentage. May I remind you there was talk about 7 at some point in the talks already between the Parliament and the Council. May I remind you that it's 4 in the Common Agricultural Policy, and that the Common Agricultural Policy has only recently entered into force. It took us years of negotiation to get the new Common Agricultural Policy, which has more attention to nature and related issues, into place. This is now a revision of the Common Agricultural Policy through the back door. Is that a very fair way of doing it? And again, I already mentioned, there's nothing in the Council position that guarantees financing for these measures that will cost money. And the cost will actually fall down on farms and not with the big supermarkets who currently have the huge profits, because they're actually potentially using inflation to actually up their own margins. So that's one of the answers. There's still concerns with the Council position that is on the table. And if you come with a proposal that on every article the Council needs to water it down, and still there are concerns with that text, maybe then the proposal in itself wasn't that good. How bad is it to go back to the drawing board, come up with a credible impact assessment and a new proposal that, from our point of view, should then also go hand in hand with the new genome techniques that are put on the table by the European Commission recently, because we're now getting blamed as EPP that we're not happy for content reasons with this proposal on the nature restoration law, but I can already predict the left of this House will be trying to stop the new genome techniques, because that's modern, that's forward-looking, that is not keeping farming the way it was 70 years ago. I think we need both. We need nature restoration and we need forward-looking modern techniques to make farming in Europe competitive. So if the Commission had been a bit more strategic, they would have done the same as they did with Fit for 55, namely a package of proposals that together were credible. So all the more reason to go back to the drawing board.
The question on the objective, the 10% objective, is in your evaluation, is it still there in the council text?
No. The Commission knew very, very well they had to take that out. They had to take the 70 years back in time for the restoration targets out. And I can go article by article by article where the Commission had to come back on its original proposal. Not enough yet. And as a result, it's like, okay, I come from a country of bicycles, right? And if your bike tire has been punctured already 6 times and is not in a good shape, you can keep repairing it. But maybe it would be better to get a new tire. And that is the case as well with this nature restoration law. Maybe it would have been better to get a new proposal.
Thanks. Francesca Benedetti, Domani newspaper. 2 questions to President Weber. The first one is, what is your comment about the way liberals are behaving in this nature restoration law dossier? If you think about 2024, what does this suggest to you about the way Renew will behave for what concerns alliances and so on? And the second question is a very short one. Do you agree with Mr. Tajani when he says that the doors of the EPP are open to the Lega and to Salvini? Thanks.
Well, about the behavior of the Liberals, you see what is happening there. The parts of the Liberal team are supporting the rejection. We also have the Dutch government, also the Belgian government who supported on council side the rejection. So that gives also a kind of an indication that there is a content argumentation behind. People are looking to the content, and then they are coming to this conclusion that this law is not ready to be supported. And that's the same for EPP. So we have colleagues who said, okay, this final agreement is now fine. That's why they voted on the council side in favor. And I can tell you also in the EPP group, some individual colleagues will tomorrow support the Commission proposal. So there are also individuals there. So there's a lively debate we have currently. What I regret very much is that we are only talking about the headline, you know. We are talking about biodiversity, yes or no. We are not so much capable to have a lively democratic exchange of views about the content. The Greens are now ready in this House to support the council text. Imagine, a few weeks ago that was unthinkable that they would support this. So where is the content? Do really Greens fight for an ambitious approach? Or is it more about their party political perspective? That's why we really insist to have a debate on content, and I hope this is possible and the debate on the Liberal side reflects this. For the other things, there is nothing to be added, to be commented. We are working as EPP Group to defend our interests, and hopefully people outside will see what we stand for and will then support the EPP in the next upcoming elections. We are observing a momentum for EPP, so we won now a lot of elections on national level. We have now last summit, when we had the preparation for the European Council, 10 Prime Minister and Head of States and Government among the EPP friends, and most likely end of July, Alberto Nuno Feijó will also be Prime Minister of Spain then. We have the 11th Prime Minister in our ranks, so we have an EPP momentum there. People trust in those who are the bridge builders, who are trying to bring things together. So the next month we will fight for our ideas, we will try to convince for our way of approaching the future, and until now we are quite motivated for doing so.
Hello, Maïwen Lamy for Context. I have 2 questions on the nature restoration file. So first of all, could you maybe tell us what you think of Ursula von der Leyen's position towards this legislation? Has she reached out to you to try to defend this legislation? And second, you said some of the EPP members might not support the rejection amendment. So could you tell us which delegations maybe do not support this rejection? Thank you.
So on Ursula von der Leyen first, about the role. So we are, as a team, as an EPP team, in regular, intensive, positive, good dialogue. So this is one piece of legislation we have several from them, many of them in front of us, where we constructively work on all the proposals, so there's no doubt about this. And you know, she has a role. She's Commission President. That means also to be president of a kind of a grand coalition. There are socialists there with Frans Timmermans, liberals with Vestager. So that is the structure of the Commission. That's why she was presenting this, the Commission was presenting this. That's the role of the Commission. But the Parliament has also a role to play. And we are here the party political, let me say, perspective. We are signaling what EPP on party political terms is thinking about this dossier. So we are respecting the different roles we have, and that is good. Also, Ursula is respecting this, so that's fine.
And maybe just to remind you that the von der Leyen Commission was supported by the S&D, the EPP and Renew, and not by the Greens, for example. And what the nature restoration law file shows you that the S&D, on many cases, in particular in the environmental field, would be rather with the Greens than with the centre of this House. And that leaves questions not so much about the EPP, but about the S&D and where they want to be and where the centre in this House is, where the compromises need to be found. Now, on the issue of the members voting for the Commission proposal, that's not a matter of delegations. I would say there are a small number of individual members, but not delegations.
We don't have time for more. I know there are more questions, even online, but the chairman needs to rush. It's 10 o'clock, so thank you very much.